takes a couple of seconds for the live stream to happen on the YouTube channel and on our LinkedIn channel. So as soon as I've got to go from the technology, which I think is the case right now, we're actually ready to go. Off we go. So, welcome to this Master Your Exit live show powered by The Big Exit. I'm Lynn, and together with Graham, I'll be your host for today. On this Master Your Exit live show, we bring practical insights, expert interviews, and tools to help small business owners like yourself prepare for your big exit. This live show airs every Tuesday live at 7 a.m. in Los Angeles, 10 a.m. in New York, or 3 p.m. when you're across on the other side in London. We keep each show short and simple, about 30 minutes maximum. And if you're tuning in on our YouTube channel or LinkedIn channel, that's really cool. Thank you so much for being here. If you're live here in the studio, I didn't see anyone sign up for this week's episode, but in case you're chipping in live and you're joining us live here in the studio, you can drop your exit related questions in the chat function of our Zoom studio, and we're happy to answer them as well. And if you're catching this episode later, all of the episodes and all of its recordings can be found on our YouTube channel or also on the website thebigexit.co/master your exit shows, with a little dash in between every single word, or listen to your favorite podcast platform where you can find all of the episodes as well. That's it for the introduction for this week, I would say. Graham, last week we had a little conversation around emotional exit readiness for business owners. And it got quite a bit of a conversation. So I felt it would be good this week to dive in a little bit further on this topic around emotional exit readiness. As you know, and I just mentioned it before we jumped on this live show, I did a webinar with the Exit Planning Institute a couple of weeks back on emotional readiness and how consultants and exit planners and advisors and brokers can help business owners not only with the technical part of exit planning and going through an exit, but also the emotional part that goes with it. And I think it's a topic we don't talk about enough. Yet, as advisors, we do get to see and experience behavior that is a little bit strange with business owners who are in the process of planning or in the process of exiting, that seems to be dragging on the whole process, and we can't really see or think why these things are happening, but they do. And last week we spoke about some of the emotional barriers that business owners experience in preparing for their exit or whilst they're in the exiting process and the negotiations that are happening in that journey. Anything that kind of like stuck with you after last week's episode related to those emotional barriers that we talked about last week?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the ones was kind of like what comes next. That was the one that stood out for me. If you haven't yet thought about what comes next, and if you've wrapped your identity into your business and haven't thought about that next phase, I think those are two of the things that kind of blended into one. That for me is one of the single biggest things that I see, and it stuck out for me. And that I think is often what drives some of the behaviors I think we're going to be talking about today. So a lot of the behaviors are manifestations of owners not knowing how to respond, to that emotional thing. And the analogy I always use with this, it's a very simple analogy, is, if any of our listeners have had kids, when a child throws a temper tantrum, or they're screaming, or they won't stop crying, or that they haven't yet developed the vocabulary or the language, or they don't know how to express the actual underlying cause. So a baby cries because it's hungry, but you don't know whether it's crying because it's hungry or because it's uncomfortable or because something else. It's just a baby crying. And I think the same applies when it comes to business owners. They're not emotionally ready. Often you see behaviors which are actually a manifestation of one of those underlying causes. So I think that's what we're going to dive in today. What are some of those behaviors? What are some of the red flags? What do they point towards in terms of that emotional readiness?
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really great. I mean, we all experience as advisors in that process. We see these behaviors, we see them happening. And I think one of the things I definitely made those mistakes in the past. Maybe you have too. Maybe this relates to other people who are listening to this episode, is the way we address these behaviors is by giving more explanation, more technical information, more of, all of these kinds of things, and not really addressing the core issue that is there. So it's kind of like we're holding the baby and it's crying, and we're like, it's all okay. And we shake it a little to give comfort, but it doesn't really do the job when the baby's
Yeah.
hungry. You need to
Yeah.
feed the hungry baby.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really help when the baby has a dirty diaper. Like you have to
Yeah.
like get them a new diaper on, just being like of comfort and trying to,
Yeah.
do the things that maybe we would think would help the baby move forward and stop crying is not necessarily the thing. So I think one of the things that as advisors, we need to get ourselves a little bit more educated on and a little bit more, getting a little bit more insight on is like, when I see these kinds of behaviors, what's the emotion behind it, and how can I help my client, business owner, navigate these emotions, understand them for themselves, bring them to their consciousness, and kind of help them move forward with, like not getting stuck with the emotion and therefore getting stuck in the process of planning the exit or the negotiations or whatever phase this exit process is in. So I think, I mean, you've mentioned this. Let's talk a little bit about the behaviors that we are seeing with some of our clients. This one's probably very familiar. It's the I need more time. We need more time. They keep on delaying meetings, canceling meetings, rescheduling phone calls, anything that is, going on in the process. And it's like, I need a little bit more time. Maybe even they say, I am not ready yet. But what they mean is like, oh, I don't have the paperwork ready yet, or I haven't, like written out the procedure, or I haven't done this, or my team hasn't implemented this piece of. So I need more time. We need more time. Time is always a priority thing. It's never about time. It's about giving priority to something. And if we don't give priority to a certain thing, we don't find the time to do it. But when we don't give priority to a certain thing, it's because something deep inside of us is holding us back to move forward. And this is probably, that we need more time, I need more time, procrastination of meetings, canceling meetings, these kinds of things. It might be due to a conflict in the calendar, but often it's not a conflict in the calendar, right? Like, how often have you said that to yourself? You said you're going to do something and then you don't do it. And it's not so much because you don't have the time, but
Yeah.
more like, I have other priorities, or yeah, I don't really want to do this thing.
Yeah, and I think that's an important one. I think remember at the end of the day, a deal or a sale of a business is about creating confidence and trust between two parties. So, if
You
you've
always say
got
that. It's
yeah,
so true.
if you've got a serious buyer identifies a business that they want to put an offer in, and generally a buyer wants to move quite quickly if they're serious. If they're a tire kicker and they just kind of exploring and all that thing, that might not be the case. But I know with serious buyers, if they see a right opportunity, they want to move quickly. So that behavior of stalling for time does two things. One is, even if you are legitimately ready, it could be something like, hey, I want access to your data room, or the data room's not ready yet. I don't have everything in the perfect order and blah, 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 and all those kind of things. There's two outcomes there. One is that the data room generally isn't ready and you need more time. Um, Now, the negative about that is immediately a buyer is going to say, look, you've gone into a process, particularly if it's the seller who's initiated a process. Okay, it might be different if it's a cold approach or something along those lines. then they might be a bit more understanding. But if you've initiated a process, hey, I want to sell my business, you've gone to a broker, you've gone to an M&A advisor, and then suddenly you don't have that stuff ready, it casts a seed of doubt in the mind of the buyer as to why that stuff isn't ready, particularly if it's a managed process. So that's the one side to it. And then I've seen cases where that stuff is absolutely ready. You know it's ready because you've been through an exit readiness with the potential seller, and then they stall for time. Okay. And that is incredibly damaging, okay, because the stuff is there and it just breaks down trust. And you're conflicted as an advisor because you say to the client, listen, you've got to just play open cards. And it probably leads into some of the other behaviors that we'll talk about just now. But that delay tactic, I think, is really problematic, particularly if there's no good reason for that. If there's a good reason, rather say and manage that time expectation, is this is not there. I need 2 weeks to get it done and then get back. So delay tactics with silence is a massive deal killer. And it obviously points to a bunch of different things. If this deal is big and it's important to you, you will find the time and you'll make it happen. I've seen where deal needs to happen and both parties are conscious of that. Guys will work till 3 o'clock in the morning for a week at a time. I've just come off it, or where we provided some valuation input in the deal, and they approached us literally on the 24th of November. The deal close date was the 1st of December, and they needed some additional information on the valuation side. We were sitting up at 1 a.m. in the morning to make sure that deal happened, and the buyer was there. He was committed, all those things. So you're just using that as a sort of counterpoint to that. It's a big red flag if there's constant stalling and delaying.
Yeah. And I think great example. And when that's happening, it's already pretty far in the process. But even when you're in the process of getting an owner and it's his or her business exit ready, and you see signals of stalling and like not honoring timelines, time frames, and whatever, even then it's not as dramatic because maybe your business isn't on the market yet and you're not in a negotiation phase yet. It's not that dramatic, but as an advisor, it's worthwhile taking that as a signal of like, is this person really ready to sell? Yeah. And do I need to push them? Is this just an issue of them not being able to manage their time? Or do I need to address maybe some underlying stuff that is there and have another different kind of conversation with this owner about like, what's really going on here? So if you're seeing those signals already popping up, even earlier in the process where it isn't that dramatic or it doesn't have a lot of influence just yet on the potential exit and its value and its progress, even then it's worthwhile to think twice about the signal that you see and address it maybe in a different way, and have another kind of conversation around like, hey, how do you feel about selling your business? What do you see yourself doing after you've sold the business, and kind of lead into that conversation of like, have you thought about what's next? Have you thought about who you're going to be? Have you spoke with your partner about it? Like all of these kinds of things, and kind of guide them into a different kind of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. And that's a really good point, Lynn, so like getting a valuation and understanding what it's worth and all of that. So we get a lot of clients who would approach us and say, hey, listen, I'm thinking of selling in 2 years' time. I want a valuation. I want an assessment of my exit readiness. You have a great meeting. There's great rapport. And they're like, cool, we're going to start in a few days' time. So then you send them the engagement terms and you try to set off the next meeting. And then, they ghost you. And then as you do with the business, you follow up with them a month later and it's like, oh, we're just really busy, but you approached us, you approached us because you wanted a valuation and that's a very big signal. It's urgent. I need this. I want this done. And sometimes they come back. Sometimes they come back 6 months later or whatever. But even as a valuation expert, we've learned not to don't want to push those too hard, but also when that happens, it's a good sign. Ask the deeper questions like, are you really ready for this? So
Yeah, because
yeah,
I think when they engage with you or they start engaging with you for evaluation or with us for getting the business exit ready, and they
yeah,
make that first step, it becomes really real.
mm,
And that can also kind of like increase that feeling of insecurity or fear
yeah,
because they've taken a step and it's like, oh, am I really doing this? It's
yeah,
becoming realer because all of a sudden I'm starting to build my exit readiness team around me. And oh,
mm,
is there still a way back? Can I still backtrack on this? All of that starts to pop up. And I think
yeah,
you as well as us with the big exit, we're quite early in that process and they
mm,
haven't really fully committed yet. And often making that first inquiry with us is all about taking that leap of faith and
mm,
simultaneously having that feeling of like, oh, now this is becoming real
yeah,
and I'm not really sure if I want it to become real, you know.
yeah.
So great example, love that. Let's talk a little bit about behavior that we get to see. So there's that stalling behavior, not taking action, not doing anything like that, or even backing out of the process
Mm.
before in the preparation and the planning, but even like in LOI stage of the deal or due diligence stage of any stage of the deal, basically like backing out of that process, I think is another behavior. And we kind of talked about it already a little bit
If I can maybe
before.
just jump in there and add a bit of color to that, I think, and
Mm,
maybe you're going to touch on that, but I think there's degrees of backing out. I think even
yeah.
maybe more harmful than backing out at the 11th hour or whatever is backtracking on agreements that have been made. So when you go
Mm,
through a sales process of a business, there's a bunch of steps in the process. Um, normally you in different terminology in different parts of the world, but basically, okay, you might get some buyers, and then you might get what we call either an indicative offer or a non-binding offer that gets issued.
mm,
And at that, you agree based on limited information, the basic terms. Am I selling for $10 million, $20 million, $5 million? What are the key steps in that? And usually what happens at that point is you agree in principle, we're in the ballpark or we're not. That kicks off a process which incurs costs like due diligence and all of those things. And then once you get to the end of that process, you get to a binding offer, usually, which is like we confirm the stuff that was agreed in the binding offer. Now, when a seller like agrees something in one meeting and then the next meeting is like, let's say, for example, the non-binding offer says the structure of this deal will be 70% cash up front and then 30% sort of earn out. And a seller says, yeah, cool, I'm happy with that in principle. And then two or three or four meetings later, it's like, no, 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 I don't want that anymore. I want 100% cash up front, or I want a 90-10 earn out, or whatever the case might be. Even those subtle sort of like changing of mind and backing out of
mm,
decisions, you can be a red flag in terms of some emotional thing behind that. So
yeah.
when it
Because
happens
for
once,
me,
it might
that's
be, yeah, I didn't understand the terms, but if it happens a second time or a third time or a fourth time, that can be
yeah.
a serious red flag.
Because for me, it's a signal of I haven't really thought yet how I want to
Mm.
live my life after
Yeah,
the exit. I haven't taken the time to speak to my spouse about it.
yeah,
Am I still going to be involved or not? Like I haven't had
mm,
that conversation. I haven't really thought about do I actually want to let this business go or not?
yeah,
Because the earn out, not earn out, I'm staying in. I want an all cash deal. I mean, all of these things are what it doesn't matter what you decide as a seller. It's all about what your own preference is, but you can only kind of be clear about this if you thought about, am I actually ready to let go of this business? And do I just want to like use cash, a certain amount of cash, and I just want to buy a yacht with it and sail the Caribbean? That will define the initial terms. But if you haven't really thought about it, and kind
mm,
of like spoke with your spouse about it or your family about it or done any of that work, that's
mm,
when I think the initial setup of how the deal's going to look like and the amount of money you're talking about and whether you're going to be staying on board or not, that's going to be influenced by all of the other work that an owner should be doing and the conversations they should be having before
Mm.
actually agreeing on these terms, because it's a whole different term sheet when you're selling because you want to leave and build your
Yeah.
next venture and need 5 million for that versus you want to sell but want to stay on board for another 2 years because you want to take this thing to the next level and just want to use your buyer as a leverage for or a lever to actually go to the next level, and it's a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
Awesome.
100%.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's talk about another big behavior that can pop up in any stage of exit planning or whilst you're already in the process of selling your business, and that's defensiveness. When you
Mm.
start seeing an owner becoming defensive about the choices they made, about the decisions they made in the business, about how the business is working, about what the business is worth or not worth. This whole, I mean, I see it coming often with like, yeah, but this business can run without me.
Mm.
When we're talking about like owner dependence or owner independence, often there can be a lot of defensiveness that is happening there with an owner who's like, of course, this business can run without me. Like, of course, I can take 3 weeks off unless I actually do it.
They've probably
And then
heard
all the
somewhere that
wheels
like
fly off and then
if
some more.
they've probably heard somewhere that like if it's not owner dependent, it's worth a lot more. So, but you but you're right there. Is it the true colors are revealed when you really press on that, right? But I think defensiveness is a really really good one. It manifests in a bunch of different ways in different parts in the process. Often that is exposed at the sort of due diligence phase, particularly if you've got a professional buyer or an experienced buyer, because due diligence can feel like an interrogation. It can be like somebody like picking at your homework. Buyers, if it's a private equity buyer, they're looking at through a lens of they're trying to get their price as low as possible. So that defensiveness sometimes can be a good thing. But yeah, when it points to sort of emotional lack of readiness, it's maybe one of the first go-tos that you see. Well, I'm not prepared to show that, or because it feels intimidating, and it is a strong behavioral indicator of something else. And again, there's no real positive about defensiveness, because even if the owner is emotionally ready and then they're defensive, then a skilled buyer is going to kind of see that at face value and say, well, why are they being defensive? What else are they hiding? What else is behind that? So the sort of the thing that sellers don't always recognize is that defensiveness creates further problems down the line. Okay. Even if they can get to a state of being emotionally ready, those first few signs of defensiveness can become a big issue in the deal, even if it does go ahead. So yeah, I mean, defensiveness is a big one.
Yeah. And I think even also earlier on in the process, when we're still in that phase of like planning and preparing and
Mm.
all of these things, I get to see, because that's the work that we do at the Big Exit, is helping small
Mm.
business owners prepare for that big exit, and helping their businesses prepare for that big exit. And there's a lot of defensiveness that can happen there too.
Mm.
When we're talking about like, uh, procedures and whatever, they'll be like, yeah, but it's such a simple business, like why
Mm.
would I have it on paper, like, and I can explain it in half an hour or something like that, like, or
Yeah.
defensiveness around like, oh, but we don't really need to have this kind of a thing, because what's
Mm.
the point? We can run the business like that. We don't need to have all of these things,
Yeah.
whether that's procedures or whether that is software or whether that is like ABCD. Could also be defensiveness around whether you should hire more people in your team. Oh, I don't need a second tier management team, because I mean, the team that I have is great. I mean, they can't make any
Mm.
decisions without me, but they're amazing. And like also in the preparation, I think there's also a lot of defensiveness that we get to see there as well. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
my baby is perfect. you're telling me the baby is not perfect,
Mm.
and I'm going to defend it and tell you why it's perfect. And that kind of like is not really helping that process move forward. But it's also then being able to not just say that you need procedures because that's going to get you a better and higher valuation. It's also about this is not about, you doing it all wrong for the last 5 years. It's not about it's got nothing to do with that, but you need to be able to address that feeling that when you're saying to a business owner, there's a couple of things they need to do or change or add to the business. You
Yeah.
don't want to give them that feeling. And if you give them that feeling, you want to address it about you have done something wrong or it
Yeah.
is not good enough, and therefore things need to change. And I think that's also a way of how to address that defensiveness. It's not like, oh, you need this because you're going to get a higher valuation. It's also about, you know, making them feel comfortable that they have made the right kind of a decision. And it's all about creating that next step for them in order to get maximum valuation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. There's a few other things in terms of behavior that you could get to see in the process. I mean, we already talked about like stalling. I need more time. We need more time. We talked about defensiveness. We talked about backing out of, like of any stage of the deal making process. And I think a little other one that we can talk about very briefly or very quickly is when you see an owner in that process of either preparing or the deal making process is a sense of them trying to over control or
Mm.
kind of like over explain everything that is happening. So kind of killing the deal with details.
Mm. Yeah,
um,
I think that's a big one, and maybe aligned to that as well is, the sense of wanting to have perfection. I've seen this 1,000 times before. It's like, show us your latest financial records, okay, or management accounts, and they 2 weeks after year end, and they're like, no, 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 I can't show you my management accounts. We've got to wait until we've got the signed financial statements from the accountants or the auditors. The reality is those numbers should not change dramatically, so that's also wanting to control the process, almost this fake sense of like, or wanting to control and wanting to have things absolutely perfect. I think those go hand in hand. And again, yeah, that's often a strong signal of something not being quite right emotionally. You'll never have perfection in a deal. You'll never have perfect signed accounts. You'll never all of that. But that comes back to that owner's desire to want to control things. And when you go through a deal process, you can't control everything. You can plan, you can what have you, but it's a two-way engagement. That's a really great one, I think, to end off with, Lynn.
Yeah, exactly. And the vision that comes to mind for me is like once you're in that process of preparing, but definitely when you bring the business to market, it's like it's a wave and you need to ride it.
Yeah.
And you can't control the wave. The wave's there, and as a
Mhm.
business owner, you will have to ride it. And
Yeah.
it might be higher than you think, lower than you think. It might be wilder than you think. There might be other surfers on the
Mhm.
wave or whatever, but it is the wave, and you just have to kind of ride it. And you can't control that process. You can to a certain extent, and you have an exit team that will help you to manage that process, but it's also kind of like riding the wave and riding it all the way till the end,
Yeah.
until the deal is done and the money gets wired and you move on to the next phase of whatever the next phase is going to look like. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Cool. Well, that leaves us to kind of like less than a minute left for this week's show. Next week, by the way, we're doing an interview. I've got the amazing David Blois coming over from London. Well, he's not physically coming over from London. He's going to be virtually coming over from London, who's an amazing business broker, does a lot of agency and consultancy brokerage work. So I'm not really sure yet what we're going to talk about. Last episode I did with him was all about like how the M&A scene is looking towards the future and how things are going to change or not to change. So I think we'll continue on that conversation next week as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. So let's wrap things up for this week as well. So that's a wrap for this week's episode of the Master Your Exit Live Show. Thank you so much for joining me and Graham today. I hope you're leaving with some valuable insights to help you prepare for your big exit or to help your clients prepare for their big exit. Remember, you can catch the replay of this episode and all of the other episodes on our website at thebigexit.co/master your exit shows with a little dash in between, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. We also love to hear from you. If you have any exit related questions you want to ask, feel free to go to our website, Master Your Exit Sign Up with a little dash in between. You can register there for the show and leave all your questions there, and we will answer them on any of the future episodes coming along. We'll be back next Tuesday at 7 a.m. Los Angeles, 10 a.m. New York, or 3 p.m. in London for more tips, expert interviews, which will be next week, and tools to help you master your exit. Until then, keep building, keep preparing, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Graham.